Episode 1 of The Testaments begins in Gilead 4 years after The Handmaid's Tale's finale. For those unaware, Gilead and most of the United States was under the control of a totalitarian regime, and despite a dedicated resistance movement called Mayday, Gilead maintains a strong grip on its population, and in particular with its women. Now in the present, we catch up with Agnes, which is June's daughter, Hannah. At this point in time, June is still trying to get her daughter back, but that's easier said than done, given she's right in the heart of Gilead. Now Agnes isn't sure what year it is, given women are actually forbidden from having calendars. In fact, just looking at one could cause you to lose a finger. Right now, Agnes is a plum, marked by the fact that she hasn't had her period yet. Daughter to the powerful Commander Mackenzie, Agnes heads off to school, pointing out how her father is keeping them safe from the Mayday terrorists. Now Paula is her stepmother, and Agnes has no love lost for the woman. She dreams about locking Paula in the attic and gets her anger out through her dolls. While out on a field trip, Aunt Vidala shows off a group of hung men, who have a white bag over their head and they're marked with a red X as a scarlet letter. Apparently they came in the night and took one of the girls for their own lustful gain. Men that included the girl's own guardians too. Now Agnes realises that as a woman they're far from safe and they can't let their guards down at all. Now Agnes and the other girls rock up at the Aunt Lydia school, where we learn about the different colours and what they represent. Tellingly, there is no red for handmaids. Now pink is for the little girls, plum is for the teenagers that haven't had their periods yet, and then once the girls have come of age and are eligible to marry high commanders, their outfits are changed to green, along with a pin too. Now, white outfits are for new arrivals outside of Gilead. Aunt Lydia and her missionaries gather them from around the world, but given their desire to fit in, the Pearl Girls are not to be trusted. Many at the school show disdain and distrust towards them. Now Agnes is not alone here though, given she's friends with a girl called Becca, the first person she met after moving from Colorado. Now Becca's already turned green and is on the verge of moving on without her. It doesn't take long for Agnes to be called into Aunt Lydia's office, and Lydia admits she's been watching her for a while, which we know because of her connection to June, and tasks Agnes with looking after Daisy, a new Pearl. She's possibly going to turn into a plum, but Agnes is to be her shepherdess and show her the ropes. Agnes makes sure she keeps her cards close to her chest, being careful not to reveal too much to the girl. With Aunt Vidala commanding over everyone here, they run a tight ship across school. At lunch the girls try to converse with Daisy, but she sticks to the usual sound bites about God. In the end, Holder takes her away to get one of God's miracles, ice cream, while Agnes and the others talk. Now Shunammite is shocked that Lydia has left Agnes with this responsibility, and right on the eve of Becca heading off for a dress fitting and marriage too. She suggests Agnes rat out Daisy and make up some lie to get her punished and away from her. Agnes is loath to do that though, and they eventually rock up at school the next day for a difficult task. Honesty brings in a man that has been found touching himself on school grounds. With the girls watching on, they all point and cast judgment on him, wanting the guy punished for his actions. Daisy is shocked as she watches a handsaw cut off the guy's arm. Daisy is the only one who can't stomach watching this, and as she leaves, vomiting in the hallway, Agnes follows. Daisy breaks protocol completely, cursing and shocked. Agnes doesn't tell the aunts and even suggests she keep the secret between them. That night while the girls are sleeping, Aunt Lydia wanders up the dorms, blessing the girls one by one. When she leaves, Daisy grabs a smuggled radio and listens to Mayday broadcasts and even turns the frequency over to listen to music as well. During a flashback, we see that Daisy is in Canada, and it doesn't take long for her to catch the attention of none other than June. As we cut back to the present one more time, Agnes finds out she's just started her period. Episode 2 of The Testament begins with Agnes narrating how her period marks her as one of the chosen ones. She knows she's supposed to be ecstatic here, and while she is definitely surprised and a little happy, she's also very scared too. This cacophony of emotions swirls around her, and with her Martha, Rosa, gone, she lets Paula know about her coming of age. Agnes is greeted with a slightly warmer than usual set of instructions from Paula, who explains that she never got the same induction from her own mum. She hands over Tabitha's cover for her pads, something that's been kept for Agnes for years. Tabitha, as we soon find out, is a woman whom Agnes believes is her birth mum. This warmth doesn't last for long though, as responsibilities shift over to Rosa when she shows up. Rosa is much more forthcoming with the girl, hugging her and offering some coffee too. Now, Rosa actually took care of Tabitha in the past when she was dying, sitting next to her bed and feeding her ice cubes at the end. At school, Agnes dismisses Daisy when she tries to talk and heads up to the bell tower alone, ringing the bell to mark her joyous day. There's actually a pretty clever shot here, as one of the girls drops her red paintbrush in the paint pot, turning the water a liquid red. The whole school gathers outside as Aunt Vidala blesses Agnes with a new pin. Things are looking up for her, until she's called into corrections. Now, corrections are done in a separate part of the school, in the Aunts' wing and usually reserved for punishments. Unfortunately, the girl being punished here is Daisy. She's admitted to her cursing from episode 1, and with the muzzle on, Agnes is forced to torture her. The girls revel in the anger and aggression of it all, as they call her a dirty girl, until Daisy brings up that Agnes was in attendance when she cursed. While the rest of the girls are allowed to leave, both Daisy and Agnes are forced to scrub their mouths out with soap. Off the back of this, Daisy apologises, but Agnes isn't really one for forgiving. She tells Daisy to go back home if it's too much for her, but Daisy explains there is no home for her. After school, Agnes is examined by a doctor, and he winds up abusing her while she's in the chair. It's passed off as normal as he reaches under to touch her breasts, but it's all very icky. It's around this time where Agnes starts having nightmares about her husband in a dark room. That night, Agnes is awoken by Aunt Lydia, who tells her that it's time. This is all part of her ceremony, where she's essentially baptised in a large swimming pool. Afterwards, Becca approaches Agnes and points out how she doesn't want a husband or to get married. She's not mad at Agnes, but you can tell from her longing glances and little gestures, she may actually have feelings for Agnes. Agnes does her best to reassure her friend that they'll both be free of the aunts soon once they're married. As for Daisy, she ends up scratching a layout of the school in secret, and she avoids detection from the others, hiding in the toilet stalls that night. However, it's clear at this point that she's part of the resistance. Meanwhile, Agnes is taken back home, but on the way she winds up talking to one of the guards outside the commander's house called Garth. They have clear chemistry, but in Gilead this is never going to happen. Inside, Agnes is brought before Commander Mackenzie, where she drops to her knees and brings up how she's become a woman. Episode 3 of The Testaments begins with a shifting perspective to Daisy, understanding how she came to be in Gilead. Back in Toronto, all the students there studied the downfall of Gilead and how quickly things turned once those officials spouting hyperbole regarding gays and women were elected. Back in Canada, Daisy hangs with her boyfriend Justin, smoking weed and directionless at the skate park. She has a pretty chill relationship with her parents Neil and Melanie, but all is about to change. Heading back home late, she finds her parents have been killed. Daisy is there to confirm her parents' identities at the coroner's, and she eventually meets Tim from social services. She apologises to him for being stoned and wants her phone, which the police currently have. When Tim leaves, June sneaks in and intercepts. She explains to Daisy that there's been a change of plans, and she leads a confused girl out of the hospital, telling her she's in danger. Her parents were killed in cold blood by agents of Gilead, of which Tim seems to be part of, and Daisy could be next. June brings up how she's a friend of her parents and has been to their vintage store many times over the years. June takes Daisy to a safe house and explains what's going on here, including how her parents are working with Mayday and have been for a while. The store is just a front. Daisy is pissed that she can't speak to her boyfriend, and eventually she sneaks out in the night to see Justin at his place. After sleeping with him, Justin refuses to run away with her. He wants to wake his parents and talk to them about this whole situation, but Daisy realises at that moment that this part of her life is over, and she needs to run. At a diner, June brings up how Gilead want Daisy back, believing she belongs to them. You see, her parents ran away when she was a baby and got her out. At this point, Neil and Melanie actually adopted her. Mayday have always looked out for Daisy since the very beginning, and June vows she should never let the bastards grind her down. Back in the present, we learn that Aunt Vidala isn't exactly a big fan of the Pearl program. She laments to the other aunts how most of the Pearls end up as nothing but Econo wives and sees the program as a waste of time and effort. Vidala also commands Daisy to go hang with Agnes outside as there's another field trip coming up. According to Vidala, this is a perfect opportunity for the Greens to learn more. On the bus, Daisy recognises Agnes checking out Garth, but she projects, calling Daisy a slut. However, this whole situation takes a crazy turn when cars show up and surround the school bus, forcing them to a stop. The group come under fire and the girls are forced into the nearby shop for cover. When the gunfire ends and the situation is contained, Agnes thanks Daisy for her help. However, Aunt Vidala's arm is broken in the skirmish, while a couple of girls are lightly injured too. Rumour has it the Mayday are the ones who attacked them, and Hulda has even more important news here. She reveals that men have body hair. She noticed it when one of the Guardians had his shirt lifted for medical attention. Daisy also chirps up about her time in Toronto and tells the others she's seen this herself because she slept with thousands of men. Her jokes work reasonably well to lighten the tension between them all. A week passes and the girls bounce back quickly, heading off on their rearranged field trip. They're jovial and show up at a girl called Penny's place, led by Aunt Vidala and her broken arm. She's a good little housewife and happily shows the plums around, believes she may be pregnant, and they all have lunch together, except Vidala, who just sits in the hallway waiting. Commander Judd is Penny's husband, and when he arrives he immediately sets his sights on Daisy, the newcomer. Judd questions Daisy's motives and she tells him she has nothing else left, which is why she's here. It seems to work to deflect attention away from her true purpose, but it's certainly a tense moment all the same. Outside the house, we get another startling revelation. Remember Garth? Well, it turns out he's also with Mayday. He brings up that the attack was supposed to be a retrieval mission, but it went horribly wrong. Daisy hands over the map of the school she's made and wants to speak to June, but Garth claims he doesn't know who she is. At this point, Daisy realises she's deep behind enemy lines and seemingly all alone. Episode 4 of The Testament begins with Daisy reflecting on the beauty of Gilead. This beauty is only surface level though, with her worried that the eyes will pull her off the street at any time. Deep behind enemy lines, Daisy is playing a very dangerous game. With marriage season among them, the attention is drawn elsewhere for now though. Daisy is happy to keep a low profile and get involved in the festivities while continuing her mission. However, Daisy is not alone here, as others alongside Garth are also on the inside as agents, one of which happens to be the florist, and she's getting cold feet. With Agnes and Becca both draped in green, they head through the streets where Daisy spirals when she sees the Mayday terrorists hanging from the rafters. Agnes tries to reassure Daisy while unaware of the girl's background, but promising that she's safe for now. Their destination is Agnes's house for a tea party. Whilst there, Becca and Agnes dance together, practicing for the commanders. Paula is downstairs and after the dancing, reminds the girls that the aunts are on their way and they need to be ready. Penny is here too, and she brings the kids over to the bounty, which are a bunch of different baskets and offerings for Agnes and Becca. One potential bachelor is Commander Stevens, and Penny has Garth read out the letter for her. It's rather awkward, especially as Daisy is no stranger to attraction. She knows Garth is playing a dangerous game here and confronts him about it during the party. Garth explains that Gilead are retaliating for what happened with the bus, and it's got Daisy worried. Garth reassures her, pointing out that they've never had someone get this close to the girls and their entire rebellion could rest on this. The aunts soon arrive at the Mackenzie house and we see exactly why this party is such a big deal. This is the last chance for these girls to prove themselves as wife material. The aunts will use this party as a testing ground to figure out who can hack it and who crumbles under the weight of expectation. Paula Mackenzie is the alpha among the married women with the most amount of power, and of course, power in Gilead means survival, so many of the girls cling to this and try to be her bestie. Daisy is clever and knows the ins and outs of the families, including how Becca's family are lower on the pecking order compared to the others. One of the major parts of the party include the Plum girls doing their best to impress the aunts, and the wives of their skills by pouring tea. Paula decides to sabotage one of the girls called Miriam though, and trips her intentionally. As she spills tea, Daisy learns with horror that this is basically a death sentence. She could well be carted off to the colonies, or worse. While wandering through the house, Daisy comes across Commander Mackenzie. They talk about Agnes, which is pretty clever because Daisy has been paired with her. Thankfully, there's no further ramifications for trespassing. He's actually surprisingly chill and eventually hands over a chocolate to her, explaining how he doesn't think Agnes likes them anymore. The tea party continues and next up is the commander's cake, a Gilead tradition. Inside is a hidden treasure, which is not dissimilar to the European tradition galette de roi. Agnes is the one who ends up with the little bride figure. Inside Gilead, the tradition leans toward that person being the first to marry in the season. Biting into the porcelain bride, Agnes chomps down and winds up chipping a tooth. Paula is pissed and knows she needs to go back to the dentist. It's here we learn that the creepy doctor that touched her up is none other than Becca's father. Agnes is brought to the dentist, where he puts her under a sedative and shuts the door. Daisy happens to be waiting in the hallway and she knows something suspicious is going on. When she gets a moment, Daisy hands over the chocolate that Commander Mackenzie gave her to Garth. When he sees the Japanese writing on the back, he explains that Japan actually has sanctions against Gilead. Daisy also warns him that Agnes is in love with him too. "Nice work letting that happen," she says. Inside the dentist's chair, Agnes awakens and finds Becca's father, Dr. Grove, washing his hands at the faucet. He wishes her luck at the ball and leaves her lying there, the implication of what could have happened hanging over her like a black cloud. Back home, Paula bemoans Agnes's weak genes, bringing up how Tabitha is not her mother and her birth mum is the weak one. Daisy tries to bring this up with Agnes, and eventually they find common ground by talking about how her mother died as a child. On the way back to school, Daisy is shocked to find the florist shop swarming with guards. Turns out she tried to run when the eyes came to her shop, and she was shot dead in the street. Daisy knows she can't panic and needs to stay the course, realising here that if she does panic or step out of line, she could meet a sticky end. That night, things take a bad turn when Daisy tries listening to her Mayday broadcasts. Aside from a brief, urgent warning from Boston, she doesn't get much else other than a high-pitched ringing. Meanwhile, Daisy starts to get undressed that night and realises her undergarments have been messed with. Becca's father has abused her. Episode 5 of The Testaments begins with Agnes drowning in shame and struggling to deal with the ramifications of her assault. After what Becca's father has done to her, she does her best to push it out of her mind. The main focus right now is the Commander's ball, and after some stern instruction from Paula, Agnes heads off for the big night. Now, Gilead has been instrumental in reducing these girls down so their adolescence is all but a fleeting memory. The only night they really get a chance to properly be teenagers is at this ball. The Plum girls are all in attendance, hoping to secure marriage proposals. Agnes is still struggling though, and she's standoffish with Becca as a result. Aunt Esty gives a little speech to the girls before they hit the dance floor. There's a big synchronised dance to kick things off, which is quite the spectacle. Aunt Lydia is the one who obviously draws the plaudits. Next up is the father's dance, where the commanders join their daughters on the floor. Only it causes more drama for Agnes, who winds up spotting Becca's father and she begins spiralling as a result. The fathers then hand the girls over to their prospective husbands, at least we think they are, who wind up talking to the girls. There's some nice chatter between Agnes and a nervous boy who talks about Jaws, a movie she hasn't seen, but it's all largely a warm-up before the more powerful commanders and their actual potential husbands enter the room. Outside, Daisy's lucky she's not sent to the colonies when she verbally lashes out at an older commander who tries touching her. Garth shows up and saves the day, promising the older man that he will sort this out. When the guy leaves, Garth talks to Daisy about the chocolate she was given. Apparently the rebels believe Mackenzie might be brokering a deal with the Japanese for artillery. Garth tells Daisy to lower her voice when they talk, but she's not exactly subtle. The tensions between Agnes and Becca haven't gone unnoticed by the other girls either. But Shu is convinced this is just the girls competing over the commander's affection. The commander dancing with Agnes right now though is called away to the war room, so he asks Garth to take over the dance. Obviously we know there's chemistry between them, and it's one of the brief moments of happiness that Agnes experiences. However, Garth doesn't want her getting in trouble, so he quickly leaves before things escalate. As for Aunt Lydia, she confronts a few of the commanders and convinces them not to let the girls get drunk. When she leaves, there's an interesting ripple of dissent as Vidala is taken aside, with Commander Judd suggesting they discuss the future together. Unfortunately, one of the girls that's very obviously drunk is Becca. Shu leaves Daisy to handle this and they head into the bathroom together. Becca admits she hasn't eaten all day, which is obviously why she's drunk right now, but she does open up about her feelings, including how she doesn't want the commanders to look at her anymore. As the pair talk, Becca all but admits she's in love with Agnes. Daisy reassures her that it's okay to feel this way, but Becca hurriedly leaves before she gets herself into trouble. Further drama ensues though when rumours about Becca begin to swirl. Shu gets angry and smacks one of the girls for talking trash about her. Meanwhile, Agnes is taken away from the party by Aunt Cabana, who brings her to Commander Judd. In front of the most powerful men on camera, she's forced to open up and talk about how she's going to be a good wife. After a bit of a wobble, Agnes eventually composes herself long enough to do her speech. She clings to the trust that God will see her through, but whether he will or not is another matter. As the party winds down, Agnes speaks to Becca. She's obviously worried, but Agnes does her best to help her friend. Aunt Lydia, meanwhile, is pissed. She questions Vidala and how she has a lot to prove, given some of the girls were drunk on her watch. That doesn't pose well for them, as Vidala lashes out at the girls afterwards. However, this is cut short when Hulda comes flying in after ringing the bell. She's just started her period, and the girls are ecstatic. Except for Shu. On the way home, Commander Mackenzie speaks to Garth, who's just on the verge of having a big promotion. He's about to become a commander, which makes him eligible. This gets Agnes's hopes up as she wants to try and match with him. Which brings this episode to a close. Episode 6 of The Testaments begins with a school on tenterhooks. Today is a day that the aunts decide on the best suitors for each of the girls. It's usually a toss up between 2 or 3 men, then there's house visits and the weddings. Aunt Lydia gathers the other aunts and starts to look over the girls. She knows them well, including what they deeply desire. However, Lydia admits she's not quite sure what Agnes wants. The irony of an unmarried woman picking out husbands for these girls is not lost on her though. Now, flashbacks this episode jump back to see Lydia as an elementary school teacher. Lessons are constantly being cancelled, and interestingly her colleague here is Vivian, aka Aunt Vidala. Armed guards are outside the school and send Keith, the only male in the staff room, outside. There they shoot him dead. The others watch in shock before they're taken and brought to a stadium. The girls are taken into different areas with pregnant women pulled aside. Lydia watches all of this unfold and realises that there's been a forced change in leadership. Everything has spiralled out of control very quickly. The black uniform soldiers publicly execute a bunch of women here. As people in the crowd are shocked and look set to try and escape, Lydia realises her best option is to hunker down and wait. In the present, the aunts discuss the best matchups, with Lydia and Vidala butting heads over Becca's matchup with Commander Maddox. This is the guy, if you'll remember, who gave her alcohol at the ball last episode, and Lydia is loath to match them up. For now, Lydia dismisses her and brings Vidala in to check on Hulda and make sure she's become a woman. However, the other focus of the Plums right now is Becca's fate. Shu is quick to bring up how her friends put themselves in jeopardy to save her reputation. Unfortunately, this hasn't gone unnoticed from the aunts, and Shu is actually punished for hitting her fellow Plum. Hulda is the one who has to hold down her wrists, while Vidala strikes her. Lydia ends up seeing this from outside the classroom, likening these girls to cooking a steak. She reflects back on the time at the stadium here, where she worked hard to keep her mental state intact. Vivian praises Lydia for being a good teacher, and the pair are actually on good terms. However, in the morning, she finds that Vivian is gone. Lydia realises at this point that having friends in Gilead will only lead to pain and suffering. She's tried to pass this lesson on to her handmaids and now her Plum girls, but that's easier said than done. Lydia is eventually taken by the soldiers, who lead her up to see Commander Judd. He's in charge of the women's sphere, deciding where she should be placed in the new order of Gilead. Lydia doesn't fight back, especially given her own abortion all those years ago could get her in a lot of trouble. Instead, she smooths over Judd's ego, telling him he's doing good work. Lydia is the one who suggests the idea of having aunts overseeing the girls. Back in the present, things aren't going too well for Judd. With Penny experiencing complications with her pregnancy and an inevitable miscarry that follows, he shows up at the school a bit of a mess. Vidala is quick to kiss his ass, but Lydia instead plays it well. With the Mayday offensive heating up, Judd takes some of the commanders off the table, knowing they won't be eligible this season. Meanwhile, Agnes speaks to Becca and admits she's in love with Garth. Agnes eventually speaks to Lydia and questions whether she may be matched up with Garth. It's an interesting dilemma for her to ponder over, and she contemplates whether to accept the request or not. Either way, she does question his eligibility with the other aunts. Back in the flashbacks, Judd brings Lydia out to the stadium once again to prove her worth. Given a gun, she's forced to hand out swift justice. Among the women is none other than Vivian. Lydia follows the plotline of her survival and she pulls the trigger against her friend, but the gun is not loaded. Judd watches this and Lydia passes the test of her character. However, it also severs the close bond they once had together. With Judd putting Lydia in charge of the girls, she gets to choose the outfits for the aunts and intentionally picks out an uncomfortable fabric as a reminder. In the present, when Penny loses her child, Lydia chose to speak to Judd. She contemplates whether it may be time to bring in a handmaid, but Judd is quick to bring up how it's not her domain anymore. Judd commends Lydia all the same though, telling her she's worth more than rubies. Speaking of jewels, we learn here that Aunt Esti was actually the original Pearl Girl. With the matches made and the aunts having made their decisions, Lydia is resolute in her desire to prep these girls for the hostility of Gilead. Interestingly, Lydia also made another promise too. After Boston fell and the drama that ensued there, Lydia vowed to document everything and everyone. Aunts are allowed to write, the only women allowed to do so in Gilead I may add, but we don't see exactly what she's written down. The last shot of the episode sees Vidala show up at Agnes's place to tell her the news of who her match is going to be. Episode 7 of A Testaments begins with Radio Free Boston giving an update. Gilead Forces' recent attempt to invade Boston has gone horribly wrong and they've suffered heavy casualties. Violence at the border here has only exacerbated the problems, and that puts Daisy in a very difficult spot, given she's obviously a spy. If she's found out, she's going to be killed. Now further flashbacks show what happened to Daisy after June left her at the diner back in episode 3. She waited, but nobody came to get her. It turns out this is all part of the test, with the waitress, Linda, eventually speaking to her at closing time. When the shift is over, she's dropped off at Rita's place. They're in the process of creating a new passport for Daisy so they can get her out of Canada. Afterwards, she'll be flown over to Colombia and away from Gilead for good. Daisy refuses to go though, wanting to join the fight against Gilead rather than hightailing it away. Rita eventually decides to let her in, knowing they've been waiting for a girl just like her to step up. One of the Mayday contacts in the city has already got her an ID with a new last name, SIN number and a fabricated rap sheet for petty theft. Her name is now going to be Daisy, and Rita is quick to squash her scoffing at the intelligence, or lack thereof in her eyes, of the Gilead girls. Rita of course knowing better than most about what it's like inside Gilead. Daisy is tasked with memorising a new backstory for herself, along with remembering the faces of the powerful commanders too. Unfortunately, one of those men that has a rather nasty history of domestic violence is Commander Weston. Remember that name guys, it'll be important going forward. Daisy is eventually recruited, but she intentionally makes it difficult for the Pearl Girls so she doesn't seem too eager. Eventually though, she's driven up to the border and enters Gilead properly. Back in the present, Daisy continues her role as Pearl Girl, with her latest task having her tattoos lasered off. Elsewhere, Agnes is crushed to learn Garth isn't one of her matches. However, Paula is quick to point out she has some good choices here regardless. Commander Weston in particular is the one to impress. Back at the school, the girls discuss who they've been matched with, and Becca brings up how she's been paired with Commander Maddox after all. There's also a commander from the colonies, and Garth. When they leave the dining room, Agnes pleads with Becca not to marry Garth, but the truth is she doesn't really want to marry anyone. The pair butt heads over their futures, especially when Agnes bitterly retorts about her perfect matchup. They're interrupted though when Commander Weston shows up with armed guards. They've had new intel recovered from Boston that's led them to the school. Inevitably, the Pearl Girls are all questioned by Commander Weston after finding the radio in their bedroom. Daisy holds her nerve rather well, but when it's over, she winds up panicking and tries to contain herself in one of the classrooms. Agnes sees her breathing heavily and eventually invites to go over to hers that afternoon, admiring her courage. However, things are a little shaky when Daisy lies to Agnes about the various trinkets she's found on the beach, not wanting to shatter her fantasies about this junk from the real world. Anyone else getting serious shades of the Little Mermaid here? With the matches complete, the families then meet each of the prospective commanders, sizing them up and seeing who would be a good fit for their girls. Things with Commander Weston don't go to plan though when Agnes brings up his previous marriage. On his way out, Weston explains how his ex-wife died in childbirth, and not only did he lose her, but he also lost the baby too, As Commander Weston says, losing his child was the worst day of his life. Paula is absolutely livid at Agnes when he leaves, gritting her teeth and telling Agnes to get away from her. Back at the school, Talia, a fellow Pearl Girl, is snatched up from the dorms for the radio and taken away. Daisy breathes a sigh of relief, knowing how close she came to being caught. As for Agnes, it seems her rebellious nature has only made Commander Weston more interested in her, and that's certainly not good news for our protagonist. Episode 8 of The Testaments begins with Agnes reeling over the bombshell reveal that Becca is due to marry Garth. They've been properly matched and it's hit Agnes hard, given her feelings for him. She's not angry at Becca though, but it still doesn't make it any easier to swallow. As for Agnes, she's matched with Commander Weston, and as part of her engagement has to put together a smash plate. It's symbolic of what their union will be like, and a show that these women are broken in, just as God intended. At school, Shu and Daisy are taken away from the other girls, who are taken to copulation class. Aunt Vidala is the one here giving the talk, but she simply gives the girls a very brief overview and tells them their husbands will do the rest. It certainly leaves a lot of them wanting. Daisy finds herself in a spot of trouble in the bathroom here though, given she winds up getting her period. When Shu finds out, she laments that everybody else seems to get their period before her. Daisy though hides the evidence and asks Shu to cover for her. Later in the episode, we do get a really nice moment between them. Shu opens up here and laments that she's had to act happy for everyone else while waiting for her own period. Her parents have been pressuring her every day too. Shu's little brother was actually on Angel's flight, which is some of the reason there's so much pressure on Shu to continue their family legacy. When Daisy explains the machinations of sex to her, including descriptions that feel ripped right out of a romantasy book to be honest, she scoffs and doesn't believe her. As for Agnes, she notices Holder acting differently, and all of this stems from Dr. Grove. It turns out he's abused her too, and Agnes is shocked when she finds out. She encourages Holder to go and talk to the aunts, but she decides to hang back and wait for the reply. Holder knows this is a risk, given it would brandish her damaged goods and mess up her current marriage plans. Things are tense at school as a result of all this, and it spills over back home too. Despite receiving Becca's engagement party invite, Agnes is not really in the mood to party. She's barely a notch above indifferent during the cake testing and flower arrangements, but Commander Weston is surprisingly nice to her. He brings up how he wants this to be fun for her too, and even helps stand up for her against Paula. The calm before the storm, I wonder? At school, Aunt Vidala calls Agnes into her office. Holder is there too, and they've come to an agreement that the abuse is all just one big misunderstanding. After the meeting, Agnes reassures Holder and tells her she's going to live a great life. During Becca's engagement party, we learn that Garth's father led the fight to keep Boston as a powerful commander. They would have lost it days earlier if not for him. In reality, he was poisoned, an assassination attempt by Mayday. In the middle of this, Agnes talks to her father, who laments how the girls are all so young, but with birth rates so low across Gilead, they don't have much of a choice but to take this route. He simply mutters about it being backed by science. To make matters worse, Paula is even trying to secure a handmaid for them now that Agnes is moving out. Outside, Daisy talks to Garth and pleads with him to get her out of Gilead. She's not going to be able to hide her period for long, and getting married is not on the cards for her. There's not much Garth can do, given he too has a handler, and Garth simply tells her to stick the course. Agnes struggles to be inside Becca's house with Dr. Grove's beady eyes on the girls, and makes a bold decision. She talks to Lydia about Dr. Grove's abuse, and Lydia tells her that Grove will be dealt with in a roundabout way, but for now Agnes needs to keep her mouth shut. Agnes eventually opens up to Daisy afterwards about her abuse, and explains this is a reason she can't go back inside. Daisy is angry and overcome with rage, but she hugs Agnes all the same, tears stinging her eyes. Episode 9 of The Testaments begins with the Pearl Girls cleaning up blood off the ground. Aunt Estee leads the charge, but this lust for bloodthirsty vengeance has rubbed off on Daisy. She's determined to get her revenge, and she knows just how to do it. Daisy rings the bell to signal the start of her period, and part of her knows that this will include a visit to Dr. Grove, which is where her real plan is going to be set into motion. Meanwhile, Becca gossips with Agnes, telling her that Daisy is a spy for Aunt Lydia. Becca warns Agnes not to mess up, otherwise she could be in serious trouble. When Daisy shows, With Aunt Estee confirming that she's one of the Plums now, Becca isn't exactly happy. Right after she puts her clothes on, Daisy is given a last minute appointment with Dr. Grove. Agnes is concerned for her well-being and goes with her, while Huldah looks worried. In a dentist chair, Dr. Grove has no interest in touching Daisy. Instead, she gets up, rips her own clothes off, and starts screaming. She bolts out the door and accuses Grove of abuse. Daisy brings this same statement to the aunts, but Lydia sees through the facade and knows this is a reckless plan from Daisy to bring the doctor to justice. She's happy to turn the other cheek though. Off the back of this, and Becca's statement too, Agnes starts to cast doubts on Daisy. She has a feeling that she might be a spy after all, of course unaware at this point that she's actually on Mayday's side. That night, Aunt Lydia speaks to Commander Judd about the abuse. He's heard about this but always chalked it up to rumours. He's going to punish the guy, no doubt, but is more bummed out about losing a good dentist than anything else. Lydia believes Becca's marriage should go through first before they do anything, to save besmirching her reputation. When Dr. Grove learns he's going to be reprimanded, he starts spiralling back home. Garth happens to be there and he overhears the situation involving Daisy. Knowing how serious this is, he decides to leave and confronts Daisy about it, angry that she's gone off script. Now Becca is angry and tries to attack Daisy at school, but Agnes sticks up for her. Of course, Agnes knows better than most what her father is like, and it all comes crashing down in an emotional chat between them in private. At that night, Becca grabs a knife and attacks her father in the bath, stabbing him several times. This isn't a dream sequence though, and bloodstained, Becca heads downstairs and grabs her jacket, heading out in the night to Agnes's place. Becca presents herself, covered in blood, and calls it divine justice. Agnes helps get her friend cleaned up, but Becca wants to run away, admitting she'd do anything for her. Instead, Agnes lets her father and Paula know what's happened, who have brought Garth over to take her away. Unfortunately, they've also called the Eyes too, who grab Becca and lock her up in the back of a truck. Episode 10 of The Testaments begins in the aftermath of Becca being taken away. Agnes is obviously torn up, and even more so when she reads the autopsy report. Now Becca didn't just stab her father once, she went to town on him with that knife, stabbing the guy multiple times all over his body, with cuts ranging from 1 to 4 inches deep. Now at school, all the kids are gathered in the dining room, where Vidala announces that Becca will no longer attend school after her father's passing. Only Agnes knows the truth here, and she rushes outside, angry and pounding Garth's chest. When Aunt Estee shows to try and break it up, Garth diffuses the situation and hugs Agnes to comfort her. Now striking a man like this is against Gilead tradition of course, even if her and Garth are close. Estee tells Agnes to snap out of it, but there's no further punishment for her. Aunt Lydia heads off to visit Becca while she's incarcerated next. She does her best to try and help the girl, but her pleas fall on deaf ears with the prison matron. Now Commander Judd is here too, and he's pissed over what's transpired. Despite Grove being on the chopping block to be sacrificed and killed, seeing a woman slay him, his own daughter no less, is a tough pill for Judd to swallow. He wants an example to be made of Becca, sacrificed in the name of fallout. Judd decides the most merciful way of handling this is to send Becca off to the Red Centre for her to become a handmaid. Back at school, Sue wants to know the truth, and with Huldah and Daisy in the bathroom alone, she opens up and tells them the truth. The four decide they need to do something to try and help their friend. Agnes is brave and confronts Vidala next, where she points out their teachings led to actions like this, and Agnes's words cut deep with Vidala, especially when Agnes bitterly retorts that she prayed for someone to protect Becca, but nobody did. Back home, Commander Weston heads over to see Agnes. She wants his help to free Becca, but he shrugs off her concerns. Getting nowhere, Agnes opens up about how she's one of the girls that Grove abused. Hearing this, Weston stands up and promises to do what he can for Becca. Off the back of this, Becca is freed temporarily. She's allowed to go home, but she'll be under 24-hour surveillance. She's also going to be questioned in a few days before remanded to the state. Meanwhile, Mayday send a message out to Daisy, telling her to meet at 10 PM inside a lorry. She manages to evade the aunts and is stuffed inside a barrel before being driven out of Gilead. She meets with June down by the docks, who decides Daisy's time is done. She hasn't been listening to a handler and has become a liability to them. When Becca mentions Agnes, June wavers a little as she hears what her daughter is actually like. Daisy refuses to walk away from this and wants to go back to free the girls from Gilead. June eventually concedes and allows it. Daisy is smuggled back in, where her and Garth concoct a story about her smoking on the grounds. She also brings up Becca too and confronts Lydia about it, asking what she's doing to try and save Becca. It's a bold move, and one that sees Lydia actually take some action. It's also helped by a similar chat with Vidala in her office too. Here they talk about Becca, with Vidala eventually confronting Lydia about the stadium incident. Lydia believes the adjustment has come easy to her, but for Vidala she's clearly been through a lot. We don't see the extent of that though, but Vidala suggests they work together rather than against one another. Lydia shows to see Becca with Vidala and they make a bold choice. The only solution to this, one that would see Becca go free, is to switch the story. Instead of Becca being the one with the knife, her mother would take her place as the murderer. At the same time, Commander Weston calls off the engagement with Agnes over her confession. It's too early to tell if this is good or bad news right now. Paula is surely torn up over this though, distraught over her daughter no longer having such a prospective marriage lined up. When Agnes finds her scrubbing furiously in the bathroom, Paula begins bitterly retorting about how grateful Agnes should be. Paula mentions how she doesn't deserve this, while also angrily telling Agnes she could have been mutilated given her past ties. Agnes has heard enough and steps out in the night. She arrives at the men's quarter and speaks to Garth. She demands that he follow through with his engagement and opens up about how she really feels about him. In a roundabout way anyway. Garth did already know this from Daisy of course, but Agnes's bravery and courage does the trick to convince him to follow through. Becca is still a mess though, and distraught over her mother's sacrifice. Not only has she lost her father, but also her mother now too. With no parental figure to fall back on, Agnes comforts Becca and the pair kiss. It's more a reassuring kiss for her than something Agnes actually wants, and a lot can be read from these micro expressions. The outcome sees Becca and Garth married, while Becca's mother is executed in front of all the commanders. Back home, Garth rests Becca on the bed and locks the door. However, we don't see whether they do anything or tie the knot. Daisy and Agnes talk in the aftermath of this, where the former opens up about June and her ties to Agnes. Now that she knows the truth, she speaks to Lydia about the current hurdles they need to overcome with her engagement. They've never had a green come back after a broken engagement like this, so it's very much uncharted waters for Gilead. Agnes also brings up her mother, June, and how she's been listed as a criminal. Interestingly, Lydia retorts back that she knew June well and that her mother never really gave up, and neither will they. As for Daisy, she writes a note to June telling her she's going to continue the fight because apparently there's nothing more powerful than a teenage girl. And that is how season 1 of The Testaments comes to an end. Thanks for watching, and do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Smash a like or subscribe to the channel, your support is very much appreciated. I'm Greg Wheeler, and from all of us over here at The Review Geek, we'll see you on the next video.